not be built near their land. But would a Trump administration uphold that decision? I'm Phil Gale, welcome to the programme. Italy's Prime Minister staked his future on the outcome of Sunday's referendum on constitutional reform. He lost and is due to step down shortly. Matteo Renzi campaigned for changes he said would cut bureaucracy and make the country more competitive.
It is my own defeat, I go. A headline that says it all. Matteo Renzi won just over 40% of the vote. A far heavier defeat than polls had predicted, and one for which he's taking full responsibility.
The next step now is mine. Tomorrow I will hold the ministers' meeting. I will thank my colleagues for their extraordinary support. And I will go to the presidential palace to inform the President of the Republic of my resignation.
After a fiery campaign, turnout was high. Around 2/3 of eligible voters cast their ballots. Renzi had his reforms would strip away bureaucracy and bring political stability. Opponents said it would wreck the country's system. Of checks and balances. This was a victory for those fed up with the established parties. For many, the decision was as much about Renzi as the proposed reforms.
I voted no, because I want things to stay as they are, and that charlatan doesn't change the Constitution. The victory of the no vote is a signal that the people are tired of austerity and the neoliberal politics of Renzi's government and those before him.
These are the people who want to lead Italy now. Comic Beppe Grillo and his populist five-star party led the no camp. They're now calling for immediate elections, hoping to ride a wave of anti-establishment fervour into power.
Let's go to the Italian capital, where we join DW correspondent Barbara Vaisel. Welcome, Barbara. Let's start with Matteo Renzi's meeting with the president. Has this happened? What has been said?
Yes, the first meeting has happened this morning. It was much quicker than expected because what we see today here is the Italian capital in turmoil, and there's a new rumor every hour. The latest, Phil, is that the president will ask Matteo Renzi not to take into effect his resignation immediately, but to, let's say, freeze it, to keep it, to hold it off for a while, and to carry on leading the government until some necessary laws are passed. There is a new electoral bill that needs to be passed before the country could even go to the polling booth again, and also the budget for the next year needs to be signed off. So obviously the aim seems to be now to gain a bit of time to do the necessary legislative tasks, and then all bets are off. It might, in my opinion, look as if this is a sign for early elections, not in spring 2018 when the regular time comes about, but also as things change so quickly here, Phil, there might be a different outcome.
OK, so the other thing that is scheduled to happen today is this meeting with his cabinet. What do we think will happen there, then?
He needs to talk to his people. He needs to talk to his colleagues and say, are you still on board? Do you agree with this sort of solution? Can I count on your solidarity for this interim time? And then later in the evening, he will go back to the president. He has to sort of present his solution. He has to present his names. And then the president will sort of give them, hand over this task to them and say, all right, you are now the interim government, and you will hold on to the day X. Then they need to go back to Parliament, do the legislative side, and then, of course, we will see what develops politically. In the meantime, of course, the opposition parties are pushing from all sides, from the right and from the Five-Star Movement, to have snap elections as quickly as possible. But if that will happen, we don't know yet.
Let's take a look at the broader European context. Italy, of course, one of Europe's largest economies. How does this decision and Matteo Renzi's decision to step down affect the wider bloc?
Oh, it does affect the bloc in many ways. The first and most obvious part is that Brussels really loses a stable partner. Matteo Renzi was sometimes a bit nervous and sometimes a bit contradictory, but generally during the last 2.5 years, Italy was a member of the European Union that you could count on when a difficult decisions needed to be made. Now, if we have a caretaker government for a while, everything is off. I mean, they can't really do anything. They can't push through any reforms. They can't take any big decisions. They can just carry on everyday life. So that is one part. The other part, of course, is the economic situation. Italy has an enormous debt burden. The banking crisis is looming. We don't know yet how that is going to be solved. And plus, we will for some time have political instability. This is really the absolutely last outcome the European Union needed.
Truly, we are living through interesting times. For now, Barbara Weisel, thank you. Let's get the reaction from the EU's largest member state then, Germany. Of course, also the main driver of the European project. Even here, though, there is a Eurosceptic party that has welcomed the Italian result. But the German government is reacting calmly.
The German Chancellor is disappointed with the outcome of Italy's referendum, but not discouraged. From my standpoint, we will continue with our work in Europe, and we've set the right priorities here. Even so, I've always worked very well with Matteo Renzi. The foreign minister had also hoped for a different result, but he doesn't feel the concept of Europe is in crisis. I want to repeat, this is a crisis of government and not a crisis of state, nor is it the fall of Western civilization. However, it's certainly not a positive contribution in the midst of our European crisis. The right-wing populist AfD party applauded the victory of the No campaign. The group believes the failure of Italy's reform plans means a failure of the EU. Of course, we welcome this result because it could shake up Italy's membership in the Eurozone, and that is exactly what we want, without a doubt. This is exactly the mindset the Greens have been warning about. They fear increased momentum for populists in Europe, such as the AfD. The consequences will go beyond the boundaries of Italy. It's clear that those who have misgivings for Europe will try to profit from the situation. It's all the more urgent for us to understand that if our neighbors aren't doing well, we aren't doing well either. Even so, Germany's Austrian neighbors have elected a pro-EU president, left-leaning politician Alexander Van der Bellen.
Well, let's take a look at the market reaction to that decision in Italy. Ben Fazulin is here at the business desk.
Thank you very much, Phil. After some initial turbulence, global financial markets have rebounded. Calming words coming from European politicians that any jitters in Italy won't cause a crisis for the bloc. Still, the nation's banking troubles haven't suddenly disappeared. The future of one financial institution in particular lies in the balance.
The economic stakes are high. Italy's third largest bank, Monte dei Paschi, needs €5 billion to avoid collapse. It's unclear if a plan to rescue it can now go ahead. The outcome of the vote initially provoked market jitters. The Italian index opened down. Shares with Monte dei Paschi were minus 11. Some bank shares were suspended, but we now see a full recovery. Shares are now at the same level they were on Friday. So the famous panic effect caused by the overwhelming no vote hasn't so far created the sell-off everyone was expecting. The panic may be over, but Italy's economic woes seem to be here to stay. The economy has shrunk 12% since 2008, and public debt continues to skyrocket. The result is a further blow for the EU as it scrambles to deal with the fallout of Brexit as well as Greece's debt crisis. Officials meeting in Brussels on Monday sought to offer reassurance.
I'm very confident in the capacity of the Eurozone to resist to all kinds of shocks. I think that we have now a very solid system, a solid governance, a strong banking union, so I'm confident.
But that confidence doesn't extend to Italian banks. Monte dei Paschi failed European stress tests this summer, and there are reports it could launch a share sale as early as Wednesday.
Let's go over now to Olaf Krieger, our financial correspondent in Frankfurt. Olaf, as we heard, they're a solid system according to bureaucrats from Brussels, but banks in Italy, which are still on shaky ground. Explain to us why these mixed messages and why the reaction today from markets, the dive in shares and now the bounce back.
Well, this is quite remarkable because we saw on last Friday and Friday's trading session that many investors and traders as well are very nervous about this upcoming decision. And now, on Monday, as you might can see behind me, German top shares are in positive territory, and the analysts I spoke with today said something like there's a lot of caution among investors and traders, of course, but there's no sign of panic. But the burning question now is, how will this story go on in Italy? Because as we already heard in the report, Italian banks are in hot water, even the whole Italian economy. And analysts and traders pointed out that Rome now needs urgently structural reforms to get Italy out of the crisis. And
one of the big questions is the recapitalization of the banks. They're in debt to a huge amount. Why isn't there real concern about that on the market? Because the situation hasn't changed yet at all.
That's right, but there's still a bumpy road ahead because many of the banks are suffering under tremendous debt over decades already now, and without any structural reform in the Italian finance sector, this will change anytime soon. That much is for sure. And so the banks are the biggest concerns, and we can see also a kind of a reaction here at German bank shares. Commerzbank, for example, Deutsche Bank is another example, which are under tremendous pressure today, but they're already back on track.
Wow. Okay, so the pressure's still there, or the caution at least is still there. What has to happen in Italy to get things back on track, to get rid of that caution, according to investors there in Frankfurt, where you are?
Again, structural reforms in the whole business system of Italy. Rome has now to walk that talk to get things back on track, to get some reforms, to get more competitiveness in the Eurozone and on the world markets as well. And until now, everyone here is desperately waiting for such steps, but we can see any reliable development anytime soon here at the Frankfurt stock market.
Olaf Krieger for us. Thank you. So is this the calm before the storm? Because Italy is extremely important to the Eurozone. Its third biggest economy, remember, and sitting precariously atop a mountain of debt. If we look at Europe as a whole, gross debt comes in at 12 trillion euros. Of course, that's all 28 member states combined, which gets you worried when you take a look at this next number. Of that debt pile, Italy's share alone clocks in at far above 2 trillion, as you can see there. And Greece, in comparison, it was Greece, remember, that had everyone worried for so long. We were following that story for you. 312 billion euros in comparison. Only tiny, really. We all remember the waves the Greek debt crisis caused. Phil, I'm sure you do too.
Yes, I do. It is etched on my mind. Look, you can see it if I lift my head. Ben, we'll talk to you later. Thank you. This is DW News, live from Berlin, still to come. A party for the president. Supporters of Austria's newly elected president, Alexander Van der Bellen, celebrate. But have they seen the last of the defeated far-right Freedom Party? And a major victory for a Native American tribe in North Dakota. A controversial oil pipeline will not be built near their land. But will a Trump administration uphold that decision? We'll have that, more of the day's world news and business in just a moment.
DW presents German Bundesliga Soccer live on the radio. In Hausa and Kiswahili. Germany's Bundesliga with live commentary in Hausa and Kiswahili. Tune in now. Murder. Abduction. Terror acts. Destruction. Boko Haram is threatening stability across West Africa, triggering a downward spiral of violence that shows no signs of abating. Boko Haram, the origins of evil, starting December 14th on DW.
This is DW News, live from Berlin. Our top story at this hour: Italy's Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has announced that he will resign after voters in a referendum rejected his plan to reform the country's constitution. The results being seen as a victory for populist anti-establishment and anti-EU movements. Meanwhile, a very different result in Austria, where former Green Party leader Alexander Van der Bellen has been elected as its next president. He took 53% of the vote against 47% for Norbert Hofer of the far-right Freedom Party. Van der Bellen hailed the result as a victory for pro-Europe parties.
A decisive victory for Alexander Van der Bellen. Austria's president-elect beat out the anti-establishment wave that's shaped election outcomes in the UK, the US, and now Italy. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Vienna has sent out a signal of hope and positive change to all of Europe. It's a signal that's going to be received in the capitals of the EU and analyzed very carefully. The result, a relief to many voters. This is the moment Van der Bellen's supporters first heard he was projected to win after a polarizing campaign. I came in the subway and people were smiling at each other. That's a very good sign. But close to half of Austria's voters sent a very different signal, casting their ballots for the far-right Freedom Party candidate. Norbert Hofer has made it clear he's not giving up.
I think in 6 years I will try it again. I'm full of energy. You look more sad than me.
Even though the Freedom Party lost the election, it still has good prospects. The campaign has boosted Hofer's popularity, and now the Freedom Party has a strong chance of winning the next parliamentary elections in less than 2 years. It puts van der Bellen in a tough position. He won't be able to unite a deeply divided Austria if he ignores Hofer's supporters.
Well, Thomas Hofer is a political scientist and consultant. He joins us from Vienna. I'm told that he's not related to the defeated presidential candidate. Welcome to DW. Absentee ballots are still being counted, but Alexander van der Bellen's 52% victory, that's hardly a ringing endorsement. Why is Austria so divided?
Because over the years, also the government didn't do its job. It's not only a far-right movement. We've seen that, of course, in Austria since '86, since the rise of Jörg Haider. But you shouldn't forget that there is perceived stalemate and gridlock in government. So I think for the development you've seen over the last years in Austria, also the Social Democratic and People's Party coalition is to blame. So it's not only so much the strength of the Freedom Party, it's also the weakness of the reigning parties, actually.
And are those reigning parties weak because they lack a sufficient mandate, because the population itself is hugely split on a number of issues?
Yes, I mean, they are to blame for not leading the country. This is the problem, and you shouldn't forget. Austria's economic data is deteriorating, which it never was in the past. Austria was always one of those countries in Europe that were best off in terms of unemployment rates and growth and everything, and that time is now over. And of course, with the refugee crisis in the last year, putting Austria and the government under a lot of pressure, the Freedom Party had a great time, had a big time, because their agenda was really dominating everything in Austria here. And they won 4 elections, last year, basically. And of course, nobody thought just a year ago, 1.5 years ago, that the Freedom Party candidate could come so close of really winning the presidency.
So let us look forward then to 2 years' time when Austria holds more parliamentary elections. Do you expect the Freedom Party to do well, to do better?
Of course, they can do very well. In the polls, they're leading now for almost a year, and by a big margin, actually. So I think they could come in number 1. However, we don't know yet. First of all, there could be early elections, even 2017. It's not fixed yet that it will be really held on the date that is scheduled in fall 2018. And the point is, who is going to be the candidate on the People's Party side? It might be Foreign Minister Sebastian Kurz, who has a great image among the Austrian public. Also, Chancellor Kern on the Social Democratic Party has good polling. So it could be a tough race for the number 1 slot. So this is not decided yet. But of course, one thing the Freedom Party certainly achieved in this year, and that is expanding their base, expanding the voting base they can reach. And make no mistake about it, Norbert Hofer was the first Freedom Party candidate ever that was able to smooth out the tone of the Freedom Party. Before that, they were, perceived as being too harsh, too extreme. So he moved into the middle, and this is certainly a development that is putting pressure on the ruling parties here in Austria.
Very interesting. Thomas Hofer in Vienna, thank you. And apologies for the quality of some of the sound there. Now, after more than 6 months of fighting, Libyan forces say they have taken full control of Sirte from so-called Islamic State. The city on Libya's Mediterranean coast was the country's last significant IS stronghold. The troops, mainly from the western city of Misrata, began the assault in May. They seized large parts of Sirte quickly, but IS resisted using suicide car bombs, snipers and improvised explosive devices. Native Americans in the U.S. state of North Dakota have been celebrating after the U.S. Army decided against allowing the construction of an oil pipeline. State political leaders have criticized the decision, while the company constructing the pipeline described it as politically motivated. President-elect Donald Trump also supports the pipeline, but says he will review the decision after he takes office.
For the people here in the camp, it's an important victory in a long and emotional battle.
This lifted my heart. You know, we came down here from Washington State to support these brave water protectors, and we came in yesterday expecting the worst, but this is the best news that I've heard forever. Best news for Native people, Native country, the whole United States, all the people, because water is so precious.
It's great. I hope we'll remain here and we'll stay vigilant until everything is guaranteed. But we are in celebration today, that is for sure.
Even snow, ice, and freezing temperatures did not stop the Sioux tribe members and their supporters. Other Native American tribes, rights activists, and environmentalists joined them in the protest camp. A lot is at stake. The pipeline was supposed to run beneath the Missouri River and Lake Oahe. The Sioux argued this would threaten their water supply and cultural sites. Now an alternate route is to be explored, but the company building the pipeline has said it's unwilling to reroute it. And U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has voiced his support for the project. This uncertainty is why the protesters say they won't leave for now, despite their victory.
FIFA's former president, Sepp Blatter, has failed in his appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport to overturn his 6-year ban from all football-related activities. Mr. Blatter led FIFA for 17 years and resigned last year after world football's governing body was rocked by a massive corruption scandal. His ban was imposed for ethics violations relating to an alleged disloyal payment made to the then UEFA president, Michel Platini, in 2011. Both men deny any wrongdoing. Action on the football pitch now. In the Bundesliga in Germany, Hamburg were looking to bring a losing streak to an end and win a game for the first time since May. The hosts were Darmstadt, who have lost their last 4 matches, so both sides were desperate for the points.
13 match days in, would coach Marcus are in relegation territory. Kostic has another potential assist, but the cross drifts past the goal mouth. On the other side, Darmstadt on the attack, one of their few chances. Aytaç Zulu just wide with his attempt from outside the area. Tension into the 90th minute, but Hamburg wrap things up. Gatoku Sakai guides the ball to Matthias Ascholek, his first Bundesliga goal. 2-0 Hamburg.
That was Darmstadt's 5th consecutive defeat and one loss too many for the club. They have today sacked coach Norbert Meyer along with sporting director Holger Fach. Both had been appointed only at the start of this season. Now here's a reminder of our top stories at this hour here on DW. Italy's Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has announced that he will step down after voters in a referendum rejected his plan to reform the constitution. The result is being seen as a victory for populist anti-establishment and Eurosceptic movements. That's it. You're up to date. More at the top of the hour. Have a good day.